Take the steps toward your life renewal and rebirth at osirislife.com. At Osiris Life, we offer you life coaching services that will put you on your personal path to success. Services include spiritual work done on your behalf, spiritual consultations, and one-on-one instruction provided on a monthly basis with techniques that are easy to apply and custom designed just for you. Get in step with your spiritual destiny by purchasing a subscription package today at osirislife.com. Peace, peace. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another segment of A New Asafo. I am your host, Kim, and as always, thank you all for taking time out of your day to check us out. I'm going to go ahead and get started and play the clip for this strong, and I'll be right back with some announcements and we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah. That's what's up. I just wanted to ask brother about the because with this new age thing, and you have all of these new age people, they talking about spirituality and transcendental and kundalini. It's kind of I want to ask you your take on this because it's my perspective from from some studies that I've studied from out of the African traditions, and based on the way they explain the Uraeus or that inner vision actually being totally or that inner verse actually being totally awakened, you should be able to have complete total knowledge and aspect to the transformation of all that's in nature. And say if you had like an enemy when you were going up against an army, if your total kundalini energy and your Uraeus has totally risen to that total highest state that it can actually obtain, that you will be able to take out whole armies and things of that nature. Because even when you study the Quran, they talk about Prophet Muhammad, and he having like 5,000 angels that are going to war and taking care of things in that situation. What's your take on that?
Well, what part? What aspect are you talking about? Just the whole thing occurring?
Well, I mean, as far as like when these new age, this kundalini and the Uraeus, and totally being awakened in that awakened state. Are you supposed to be able to take out like whole armies if and not be able to be defeated if you're like totally reached that that Christ state?
Well, the thing is, it depends on what your life purpose is. We're talking about a Christ state. We're also talking about an entity that gave up its physical corpse in order to transform humanity. So maybe your purpose and your reality is to surrender yourself to that army. It's really dependent.
We could use the Heru concept or the Uraeus, the pineal gland totally awakened.
Well, let's first start here, because you mentioned something about knowledge and you mentioned something about Kundalini and New Age. First off, there really is no New Age. The things that are being spoken about and the things that you're referring to are actually ancient. So we're coming into a place now where first off, there is a collective Kundalini awakening. There's a collective heating up of things, certainly. But we're also coming into an age where we've discovered that our traditional institutions of religious learning have not really been working for us in the way that we hoped they would have. So people are looking for alternatives. And in their alternatives, they're going back to the source and to the essence, which is leading them to these different stories and these different thoughts. But it's important to understand that when you're reading things about people going against armies, or I have a legion of angels who I walk with, it's very important to understand that these things are speaking about a metaphysical and a metaphorical reality. Now, does it mean that you can take out a physical army? You certainly can, if that's what you will yourself to create, because once you start interacting with the world on an atomic level, and this is where we get the term Atum Mare or Oludumare. Oludumare means the owner of the serpent's womb, and here we're dealing with atomic beginnings. Then certainly you can rearrange the atoms and the molecules of those who would seek to be your enemy, but you can also shapeshift and transform what you're going to be in that moment. So maybe it's not about defeating the army. Maybe it's when you start pulling on the various, again, we're dealing with those Orisha, those selected consciousness, you may say, you know what, in this moment, I'm going to be water. And I'm going to allow them just to flow right through me. I'm going to keep going. So really, it depends on what you select and what you decide to be and choose. But I think it's important that we not get stuck in and crystallized in ancient legend and lore without realizing that we currently, right now, you and I, as you and I are having this conversation, we are writing the new mythology. So it's more important for us to look at what we need in this time. I mean, when's the last time you got approached with a 5,000 member army, single-handedly? So, but there are some more other type of real situations you might get approached in, like someone trying to mug you in an elevator. How would you deal with that? Or someone trying to lift your wallet as you're going through a turnstile. These are more, applicable. Or dealing with a stormtrooper or a police officer who may be trying to brutalize you. What can we do in those moments? Can we use sound vibration to make them stop or to scare them? Or if we study a martial arts, can we now imbue our body with the ashe of these warrior archetypes so that our skin becomes like iron when we go against them? It's very important that when we're studying these things that we create a practical link between reality and between the divine and do the work. So if you're saying, okay, I want to be able to send an army to flee, then you should be learning technology and warfare at the same time while you're learning your voodoo. Okay, so that's where you link the two together, and that's when we can create a real and more practical and stronger community. And those communities that are currently thriving around the world right now, that's what they're doing. But the new mythology is here and now. As far as this new age stuff, I mean, just throw that term out. There's nothing new. This is old stuff. It's been in our blood because our Egun, our ancestors, have been in our blood. You don't know your age because you're as old as the blood in your body, and because we have no birth date, our blood is timeless. So therefore, nothing's new to us. Now, those who have a birth date or who have new blood in them, or their blood is just a couple of thousand years old, then they have a different story that they may tell. Okay, so whatever it is that you need to do in this day and time, you are certainly equipped through the willpower and the intent of your breath of life, which is your soul. Okay, anything that you need to do.
Are you familiar with the story of Ogun, Oshun, and Oya? Ogun was married to Oshun and Oya. This is told as a love story, but is actually describing an alchemical process. Ogun is iron, Oshun is fresh water, and Oya is air. Iron was submerged in water, causing it to rust. Then air came and separated the mixture and brought an end to the marriage. This is actually the process of corrosion and evaporation. These alchemical processes are also directly related to spiritual evolution. How? To find out, register for the next live webinar, Alchemy, on November 11th, 2015. Visit saduluhouse.com/events to RSVP and to see our list of monthly webinars for 2016. 2016 webinar topics include meditation, spiritual cleansing, astral projection, chakras, crystals, water magic, candle magic, the third eye, animal totems, dreams, and sex magic. Don't forget, check us out at saduluhouse.com/events. Okay, welcome back, and that was the clip for this strong. And I just want to remind you all to make sure that you get registered for the webinar coming up next Wednesday. That's on the 11th, and it is on alchemy. And so you can go to saduluhouse.com/events to get registered for that webinar. And so, you've heard me say before that this is the third webinar in a series that I've been working on. The first one was on herbs, the spiritual gifts of herbs. The second one was on oils, And now we're tying all those concepts together and finishing up with alchemy. If you missed the first two, don't worry about it. You will be able to catch the books and the courses that we're going to offer. So each webinar is actually going to have its own book and its own course where you'll be able to go even deeper into some of these concepts. So don't feel bad if you missed it, and you definitely can still check out this third one. You won't, be left out or feel like you're missing something. So I'll try to cover some of those things that you may have missed the first couple of times. But you can register at saduluhouse.com/events. And you'll also be able to see some of the other upcoming webinars that we have for 2016. The Alchemy webinar is also the last webinar for this year. So the next one won't be until January. And I think the first one is going to be on meditation, if I'm not mistaken. But just make sure you check saduluhouse.com to stay updated on that. Again, Sadulu House is the school component of Anu Nation. So all of our courses, the trainings and classes or anything else that we may offer like that is going to be found on Sadulu House. Okay, Anu Nation is actually the hub website, and this is where you would go to sign up for the newsletter to keep you in the loop of everything that's going on. So make sure you go to anunation.org to sign up for the newsletter. But as far as all the trainings, courses, webinars, classes that we offer, you would definitely go to saduluhouse.com. Okay. In the meantime, I do want to make sure that you guys are taking advantage of all of the resources that we offer. So I'm going to try to quickly go over some of the other sites that we have. You can check out all of the weekly shows that we have. That's Masterminds Monday with Sister Felicia and Damon Rawls. On Monday, Anu Asafo, of course, and Thunderground Thursdays and Foundational Fridays. All of that is on our Enlightenment and Transformation channel that's on YouTube. And the name of that channel is Enlightenment and Transformation TV. Okay, so you can go there to check out all the shows if you've missed any, or if because I know like it may be hard to keep up sometimes because we're pumping out shows like 4 days out of the strong. So you can go there and click subscribe, and you can kind of keep up with what's going on. Okay, some of the other YouTube channels are Orisha Yoruba, Anu Nation, Sadulu House, and Yuya Asan Anu. And so since it is past November 1st now, remember that we've been saying that all of the shows are going to be broadcasted from YouTube from now on. So we're no longer going to be on Blog Talk. The only show that's going to be on Blog Talk from now on, again, is Chief Speaks. And that's because we also broadcast on High Frequency Radio Network. But from now on, everything is going to be on YouTube. And this also helps with some of these technical issues. I'm actually uploading this particular show after the original time that it's supposed to air, just because we've had some technical issues while I was in the middle of it earlier today. So I wanted things to be a lot smoother for your listening enjoyment. And just try it again and upload it again, so it'll be a whole lot smoother. So the clip that you heard at the beginning of the show came from, I'm going to see if I can find the original name for the show, but Chief was actually a guest on someone else's show. And there was a caller that called in with a question, and you heard his question. And the thing I wanted to point out with this clip is that, and this is kind of the ongoing theme of the show today, is that sometimes we overcomplicate things, so much so that we can't get any practical use out of it. So this caller called in with a question, and as you heard, he was talking about New Age concepts and Uraeus and Kundalini energy and fighting an army with, by raising your Kundalini energy and all this kind of stuff. And the first thing Chief did was he's like, okay, hang on just a second. let's go back to the first thing you said. So the first thing he wanted to do was, let's simplify this a little bit, because you're getting to be a little bit too technical and too it was too technical. And sometimes when we come into consciousness, it's like once we start studying something, we get wrapped up in these big words and things that we just learned. And then sometimes we can kind of be eggheads and we want people to know that we know, kind of show off a little bit that all these comedic terms and, all this other kind of stuff. But, even though you may know these terms, you have no idea whatsoever of how to apply the concepts. And so the point is like, if you can't apply the concepts, what's the point of knowing all of this fancy stuff in the first place, right? So, Chief, as he normally does, just, being that Ogun acidic force, just kind of broke some of this stuff down so that we can actually figure out exactly what it is we're talking about. Okay, so I'm going to play the clip one more time so that you can hear it again, and then we'll go ahead and dive into the concepts a little bit deeper.
Yeah. That's what's up. I just wanted to ask brother about the because with this new age thing, and you have all of these new age people, they talking about spirituality and transcendental and kundalini. It's kind of I want to ask you your take on this, because it's my perspective from from some studies that I've studied from out of the African traditions, and based on the way they explain the Uraeus, or that inner vision actually being totally, or that inner verse actually being totally awakened, you should be able to have complete total knowledge and aspect to the transformation of all that's in nature. And say if you had like an enemy when you were going up against an army, if your total kundalini energy and your Uraeus has totally risen to that total highest state that it can actually obtain, that you will be able to take out whole armies and things of that nature. Because even when you study the Quran and talk about Prophet Muhammad, and he having like 5,000 angels that are going to war and taking care of things in that situation. What's your take on that?
Well, what part? What aspect are you talking about? Just the whole thing occurring?
Well, I mean, as far as like when these new age, this kundalini and the Uraeus, and totally being awakened in that awakened state. Are you supposed to be able to take out like whole armies if and not be able to be defeated if you're like totally reached that that Christ state?
Well, the thing is, it depends on what your life purpose is. We're talking about a Christ state. We're also talking about an entity that gave up its physical corpse in order to transform humanity. So maybe your purpose and your reality is to surrender yourself to that army. It's really dependent.
We could use the Heru concept, or the Uraeus, or the pineal gland totally awakened.
Well, let's first start here, because you mentioned something about knowledge, and you mentioned something about Kundalini and New Age. First off, there really is no New Age. The things that are being spoken about and the things that you're referring to are actually ancient. So we're coming into a place now where first off, yeah, there is a collective Kundalini awakening. There's a collective heating up of things, certainly. But we're also coming into an age where we've discovered that our traditional institutions of religious learning have not really been working for us in the way that we hoped they would have. So people are looking for alternatives. And in their alternatives, they're going back to the source and to the essence, which is leading them to these different stories and these different thoughts. But it's important to understand that when you're reading things about people going against armies, or I have a legion of angels who I walk with, it's very important to understand that these things are speaking about a metaphysical and a metaphorical reality. Now, does it mean that you can take out a physical army? You certainly can, if that's what you will yourself to create, because once you start interacting with the world on an atomic level, and this is where we get the term Atum Mare or Oludumare, Oludumare means the owner of the serpent's womb, and here we're dealing with atomic beginnings, then certainly you can rearrange the atoms and the molecules of those who would seek to be your enemy, but you can also shapeshift and transform what you're going to be in that moment. So maybe it's not about defeating the army. Maybe it's when you start pulling on the various, again, we're dealing with those Orisha, those selected consciousness, you may say, you know what, in this moment, I'm going to be water, and I'm going to allow them just to flow right through me. I'm going to keep going. So really, it depends on what you select and what you decide to be and choose. But I think it's important that we not get stuck in and crystallized in ancient legend and lore without realizing that we currently, right now, you and I, as you and I are having this conversation, we are writing the new mythology. So it's more important for us to look at what we need in this time. I mean, when's the last time you got approached with a 5,000 member army, single-handedly? So, but there are some more other type of real situations you might get approached in, like someone trying to mug you in an elevator. How would you deal with that? Or someone trying to lift your wallet as you're going through a turnstile. These are more, applicable. Or dealing with a stormtrooper or a police officer who may be trying to brutalize you. What can we do in those moments? Can we use sound vibration to make them stop or to scare them? Or if we study a martial arts, can we now imbue our body with the ashe of these warrior archetypes so that our skin becomes like iron when we go against them? It's very important that when we're studying these things that we create a practical link between reality and between the divine and do the work. So if you're saying, okay, I want to be able to send an army to flee, then you should be learning technology and warfare at the same time while you're learning your voodoo. Okay, so that's where you link the two together, and that's when we can create a real and more practical and stronger community. And those communities that are currently thriving around the world right now, that's what they're doing. But the new mythology is here and now. As far as this new age stuff, I mean, just throw that term out. There's nothing new. This is old stuff. It's been in our blood because our Egun, our ancestors, have been in our blood. You don't know your age because you're as old as the blood in your body, and because we have no birth date, our blood is timeless. So therefore, nothing's new to us. Now, those who have a birth date or who have new blood in them, or their blood is just a couple of thousand years old, then they have a different story that they may tell. Okay, so whatever it is that you need to do in this day and time, you are certainly equipped through the willpower and the intent of your breath of life, which is your soul. Okay, anything that you need to do.
All right, so that was the clip for this strong, and I do apologize for the crackling and the popping in the background of the clip. That was actually in the radio show, so it's not any technical issues that I'm experiencing on my end. But I wanted to play the clip because include the clip in this strong show because so often, like I said, when we come into consciousness, we use these huge, concepts. We use these big words, and I just wanted you all to hear, and this is not to jump on the caller, but I just wanted you all to hear how sometimes the things that we ask, like it's so far-fetched that it serves no purpose. And then our regular lives are a mess, but we're talking about all this, high level, spirituality stuff. And our, like I said, our root chakra stuff is just a mess. So one of the first points I wanted to bring out, of course, is that we just sometimes overcomplicate things. So, oftentimes when we get into deeper study, we forget that these stories are metaphors for other things. And we can do this with the Bible. It's like once we leave the church and come into consciousness, we can quickly say that we don't take the Bible and the stories in the Bible literally, but then we turn around and apply that same level of fundamental thinking when it comes to Orisha or Voodoo or Candomblé, whatever it is we're studying that's indigenous. We really take this stuff literally, and I've heard people say before that the Orisha were actual living people walking the earth, and these are energies. So sometimes we can still be just as fundamental as we used to be. And we take the stories way too literal. We don't realize that these are just metaphorical teachings. And so, like, even with sometimes we have to go back to our childlike mind. And so, like with kids, when you're trying to teach them difficult concepts, a lot of times what you do is, of course, put it in a story. And if you remember, or if you have children, you'll notice that a lot of stories that try to convey a message that we teach our kids when they're very young, it's always done with animals, you know. And so for adults, we have, with kids, we use animals. With adults, we use love stories and relationships, So it's just like one of the commercials that I made for the alchemy webinar coming up. And I gave the example of the Ogun, Oshun, and Oya, love triangle kind of thing. You'll hear oftentimes in these patakis that certain energies were married or mated to other energies, more than one energy. And so sometimes people take these things literally, and it's a much deeper explanation that's behind that. That story is just to draw you in, because like I said, with kids you may use animals, but with adults you use adult situations. So Ogun was married to Oshun and Oya, and so in that commercial, which you can find on Sadulu House's YouTube page or on any of our Facebook pages, you'll see that that story is actually explaining an alchemical process, and we're talking about corrosion and evaporation. So there's a much deeper story to these myths that we learn, and to these patakis that we learn. So sometimes you just gotta, bring it down. We don't have to be so technical and so, just so difficult all the time when we come into consciousness. And like I said, another thing it does is it just kind of makes you look a little obnoxious, a little bit. We just, want to sound deep. and the problem and the problem with that is that you lose the meaning of what's being said, and you can't apply it at all. Just like the army example in the clip, Chief asked him, like, how often are you actually going to find yourself in a one man war with 500 people, or even fighting angels and demons, literally. But you may have to defend yourself, like if you were being robbed. Now, can you apply all that Uraeus, Kundalini, New Age stuff? Can you apply those things that you've learned in a real life situation, such as being robbed? And this is why I love the webinars and the classes and the shows that Chief does. And it's because he breaks it down to us in a very practical way so that we can use these things that we're learning. And, so he's not just turning out like obnoxious eggheads that are running around trying to debate people and just show what we know. He's really trying to show you that, look, these are concepts that you have to be able to incorporate in everyday life. So we got to learn how to affect basic stuff, root chakra stuff. And remember that you always have to start there. Before you can travel to all these higher dimensions and these higher chakras, remember that you always have to start at the base. You always have to start at that root chakra. And if your root chakra is off, you're not going to be able to travel to all these other different chakras and dimensions and things. At least, you won't be able to travel there and be effective and actually do something with it. So it's important for us to create a practical link between reality and the divine, and do the work. That's what the most important thing is. We have to do the work. So ritual is something that creates that link, and it's part of the work. So again, that's what this alchemy course is about. And I do want to say that I hope that you all weren't so put off by the name of the webinar, which is alchemy, and think that this is not related to an indigenous science, because it's very much rooted in African spirituality and science. If you just simply break the word down, you have Al and you have Kim. And we know that Al represents the divine. Al or El, you're deifying something. So, and then Kim means black. So we're talking about the divine womb, or the divine black, or chaos, the darkness. So alchemy is like the study of how to master, or how to study and work with the divine womb, or blackness, this void. And so some of the scientific names that you may hear for things, for Kim, or the black, or the void, would be like chaos theory, junk DNA, black holes, or dark matter. And what's so interesting is that the terms change, when they have a better understanding of the concept. So we started off with junk DNA, and now we're talking about black holes or dark matter. And so I had to ask myself, how do they get this understanding? And of course, they get this by actually going to the continent and paying African people to give them the information, so that they can take it back and rebrand it, or rename it, and pass it off as their own work. And that's why they're always digging up graves and everything over there. Always over there, taking artifacts or digging something up. So mastering and learning to work with the void, or the unseen, in order to change physical reality is what alchemy is. And that's what the webinar is going to be about. And so, and that's what your rituals and things are about. The second point I wanted to bring up is something that he asked in the question. He was asking about, what about all this new age stuff? And Chief was basically saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And actually, there's a physicist, I think his name is James Gates, if I'm not mistaken, that came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And he's a quantum physicist. And this is a melanated individual, and he has linked Adinkra symbols to portals in the universe. And he also has linked these Adinkra symbols to binary code. And when you think about it, when I was listening to some of his research, when you think about it, what is binary code and portals? What is that all about? And all that is Odu. That is African divination. And this is practiced all over Africa. It's not just with one particular group. So this binary code and the symbols and things that we use are linked to portals in different worlds. But you have to get to that point to understand it. This is not something that you're just going to be able to pick up. But you see how all of a sudden now this indigenous science is now studied by quantum physicists. So basically what I'm saying is that these so-called new age concepts or new scientific discoveries are actually native to African traditions. But what they've done is they've just, went over there, studied it, got the information, and brought it back to their scientific community, gave it a new name, and now they just, it's passed off as some new age concept. And this is all brand new information. We just discovered this, So this happens all the time. This is nothing, nothing new. This is, and this has been going on forever in all areas of life. Spirituality is no different. So one of the reasons why this may be hard to recognize is because indigenous traditions are normally taught holistically. Nothing is separated. So things like health, music, astronomy, culinary arts, farming, all of these things are taught using like a common African thought pattern. It's not separated into individual subjects. In Western culture, everything is separated. If you go to a doctor, we have specialists over here. So you got an ear, nose, and throat guy. You got a gastroenterologist. You got people that specialize in all these different areas of the body instead of treating everything as a whole. So this is very common to do in Western culture. Everything is taken apart and separated. And when you do this, it's easy to manipulate the information and twist it around. You'll think one thing is not related, is completely unrelated to the other. And if you think about it, it creates a sort of dysfunctional type of pattern of thinking, because you'll start to do this in every if you've been raised in Western culture, you'll start to do this with everything. Okay, so I'm going to show you a quick clip in just a second to show you how this is illustrated, and I want you to pay very close attention to the language of the speaker, and then I'll be right back and we'll discuss that and close out.
Now, in the 1980s, I happened to notice that if you look at an aerial photograph of an African village, you see fractals. And I thought, this is fabulous. I wonder why. And of course, I had to go to Africa and ask folks why. So I got a Fulbright scholarship to just travel around Africa for a year asking people why they were building fractals, which is a great job if you can get it. And so I finally got to this city, and I'd done a little fractal model for the city just to see how it would sort of unfold. But when I got there, I got to this palace of the chief, and my French is not very good. I said something like, "I'm a mathematician and I would like to stand on your roof." But he was really cool about it. He took me up there and we talked about fractals. And he said, "Oh, yeah. We know a rectangle within a rectangle within a rectangle. We know all about that." And it turns out the royal insignia has a rectangle within a rectangle within a rectangle. And the path through that palace is actually this spiral here. And as you go through the paths, you have to get more and more polite. So they're mapping the social scaling onto the geometric scaling. It's a conscious pattern. It is not unconscious like a termite mound fractal. This is a village in southern Zambia. The Baila built this village. It's about 400 meters in diameter. You have a huge ring. The rings that represent the family enclosures get larger and larger as you go towards the back. And then you have the chief's ring here towards the back, and then the chief's immediate family in that ring. So here's a little fractal model for it. Here's one house with the sacred altar. Here's the house of houses, the family enclosure, with the humans here where the sacred altar would be. And then here's the village as a whole, a ring of rings, with the chief's extended family here, the chief's immediate family here. And then here, there's a tiny village, only this big. Now you might wonder, how can people fit in a tiny village only this big? That's because they're spirit people. It's the ancestors. And of course, the spirit people have a little miniature village in their village, right? So it's just like George Cantor said, the recursion continues forever. Now, you might ask yourself 3 questions at this point. Aren't these scaling patterns just universal to all indigenous architecture? And that was actually my original hypothesis. When I first saw those African fractals, I thought, wow, so any indigenous group that doesn't have a state society that's in a hierarchy must have a kind of bottom-up architecture. But that turns out not to be true. I started collecting aerial photographs of Native American, South Pacific architecture. Only the African ones were fractal. Second, you might ask, well, Dr. Eglash, aren't you ignoring the diversity of African cultures? And 3 times the answer is no. First of all, I agree with Mudimbe's wonderful book, The Invention of Africa, that Africa is an artificial invention of first colonialism and then oppositional movements. No, because a widely shared design practice doesn't necessarily give you a unity of culture, and it definitely is not in the DNA. And finally, the fractals have self-similarity. So they're similar to themselves, but they're not necessarily similar to each other. You see very different uses for fractals. It's a shared technology in Africa. And finally, well, isn't this just intuition? It's not really mathematical knowledge. Africans can't possibly really be using fractal geometry, right? It wasn't invented until the 1970s. Well, it's true that some African fractals are, as far as I'm concerned, just pure intuition. So some of these things, I would wander around the streets of Dakar asking people, well, what's the algorithm? What's the rules for making this? And they'd say, well, we just make it that way because it looks pretty, stupid. But sometimes that's not the case. In some cases, there would actually be algorithms, and very sophisticated algorithms. So in Mengwetu sculpture, you see this recursive geometry. In Ethiopian crosses, you see this wonderful unfolding of the shape. In Angola, the Chokwe people draw lines in the sand, and it's what German mathematician Euler called a graph. We now call it an Eulerian path. You can never lift your stylus from the surface, and you can never go over the same line twice. But they do it recursively, and they do it with an age grade system. So the little kids learn this one, And then the older kids learn this one, and then the next age grade initiation, you learn this one. And with each iteration of that algorithm, you learn the iterations of the myth. You learn the next level of knowledge. And finally, all over Africa, you see this board game. It's called Awari in Ghana, where I studied it. It's called Mancala here on the East Coast, Bao in Kenya, Sogo elsewhere. Well, you see self-organizing patterns that spontaneously occur in this board game. And the folks in Ghana knew about these self-organizing patterns and would use them strategically. So this is very conscious knowledge. The most complex example of an algorithmic approach to fractals that I found was actually not in geometry. It was in a symbolic code. And this was Bamana sand divination. And the same divination system is found all over Africa. You can find on the East Coast as well as the West Coast. And often the symbols are very well preserved. So each of these symbols has 4 bits. It's a 4-bit binary word. You draw these lines in the sand randomly. And then you count off. And if it's an odd number, you put down 1 stroke. And if it's an even number, you put down 2 stroke. And they did this very rapidly. And I couldn't understand where they were getting, they only did the randomness 4 times. I couldn't understand where they were getting the other 12 symbols. And they wouldn't tell me. They said, no, I can't tell you about this. I said, well, look, I'll pay you. You can be my teacher and I'll come each day and pay you. I said, it's not a matter of money. This is a religious matter. And finally, out of desperation, I said, well, let me explain George Cantor in 1877. And I started explaining, why I was there in Africa. And they got very excited when they saw the Cantor set. And one of them said, come here, I think I can help you out here. And so he took me through the initiation ritual for a Bamana priest. And of course, I was only interested in the math, so the whole time he kept shaking his head going, I didn't learn it this way. But I had to sleep with a kola nut next to my bed, buried in sand, and give 7 coins to 7 lepers, and so on. And finally, he revealed the truth of the matter. And it turns out it's a pseudo-random number generator. They're using deterministic chaos. Now, because it's a binary code, you can actually implement this in hardware. What a fantastic teaching tool that should be in African engineering schools. And the most interesting thing I found out about it was historical. In the 12th century, Hugo of Santillana brought it from Islamic mystics into Spain. And there it entered into the alchemy community as geomancy, the divination through the earth. This is a geomantic chart drawn by for King Richard II in 1390. Leibniz, the German mathematician, talked about geomancy in his dissertation called De Combinatoria. And he said, well, instead of using 1 stroke and 2 strokes, let's use a 1 and a 0. And we can count by powers of 2, right? 1s and 0s, the binary code. George Boole took Leibniz's binary code and created Boolean algebra, and John von Neumann took Boolean algebra and created the digital computer. So all these little PDAs and laptops, every digital circuit in the world started in Africa.
Okay, so that was a clip from a TED Talks episode. And the scientist's name, I think his name is Ron Eglash, E-G-L-A-S-H. So if you want to check out the entire 20-minute clip, you can find it on YouTube. But I cut it out a little bit just to avoid some of the technical information that was in the middle of that. And of course, we're talking about making things simple. But you can view the entire clip on YouTube. So I wanted to pull a few points out of that clip to illustrate what I was explaining in the first half of the show. So one is that he completely denies the synonymous, understanding of fractal patterns in African culture. At first, he says, it doesn't give you a unity, these patterns doesn't necessarily imply like a unity of culture, and it's definitely not in the DNA. Yet the patterns were only found in African society. He studied other traditions. He studied Native American and some others, but he found that these patterns only existed in African societies. So apparently it does have something to do with DNA. And it was, even down to children's games. He gave the example of Awari, and, we call it Mancala here in the United States. And, rites of passage with the children, and he traveled all over Africa from east to west to south. And so in the end, he said that it's a shared technology in Africa. So you have to pay attention to the language some of these scientists use. They can be very tricky with words. and mainly they want to just point out the fact that they want to make it, they want to give you the impression that, these things couldn't possibly be because, we're intelligent, Africans are intelligent, or, they know about things. It's got to be something else. It can't be that. But another thing he said, I want to bring out is that these fractal patterns are embedded in every part of African culture. From the from society, the way things are handled in society, or you just relationships, down to the pottery. Everything reflects this fractal pattern, which is a pattern that's found in nature. Everything mimics nature, and as you've heard Chief say, this is a nature-based tradition. So this is something that you can't escape. You have to understand nature when studying these traditions. And so, like I said, not only is the physical village laid out this way, but the actual social structure. And he said that, you had to get more polite the further into the compound that you got. So you can't just walk in. You know what I mean? There are steps, and the way the compound is laid out is in this fractal pattern. So the closer you got to the chief, the more reverence you had to show and the more polite you had to be. So I ask you, does this sound familiar? And this is for some of those who have complained about the structure of the classes. Chief talked about this Sunday. The structure of the classes and the whole self-entitlement and rudeness issues that, that we have, with Chief. And by the way, Chief is not a nickname. This is not like a self-appointed nickname he's given himself. He's an actual chief. But he's spoken on this like several times. And so things are structured a certain way for a reason. The classes are structured a certain way for a reason. And it's not always explained or spoken. We've got to get out of this Western kind of way of thinking. We think that just because we're in this information age and I can Google it, that I'm entitled to this information. You have to tell me. And things do not work that way. And so lessons are given in many different ways. It's not a linear way of thinking, step 1, step 2, step 3. It doesn't work that way. So the information doesn't just come in a book or a course or on a radio show. Sometimes he teaches you these lessons through interaction. So he's showing you and trying to teach you how to make these lessons come alive within you. It's not just book knowledge. Also in the clip, the guy was saying that, of course, he found that these patterns only occurred in African architecture. So you actually heard him go into all these other branches of sciences like alchemical, geomancy, Boolean algebra, and all these other things. And he gave you almost like a lineage of different people who were accredited with so-called discovering these technologies. But it was only after they learned it from Africans. But, hundreds or thousands of years later, certain people were credited with, as discovering these things. So what they did was simply, some of these men did, most of them, was simply rename what they learned from Africans and passed it off as some type of scientific advancement, of their own culture or their own group or community. And he even said, he was like, so fractal geometry wasn't invented until the 1970s, which is, of course, you see that this is not true. And so, again, like I said, the point of this is to show, like he said, he even said it, Africans couldn't possibly have known about this before the 1970s, right? So he discredits the genius of this science by saying that the people only did it because of intuition, or because it's or because it's pretty. So you see how they quickly dismiss things that they don't understand, and they do it in a very slick way in the language. So going back to the whole thing with junk DNA and black holes and dark matter and chaos theory, what they don't understand, they quickly dismiss it. And then they always try to make it, like I said, seem like this is not a product of intelligence. This is just something that's just, wild in them. Like, they don't know why they do it. They're animals, they just run on automatic. They do it out of intuition. It's pretty. So they always try to, it could, like I said, couldn't possibly be because they're intelligent. And later on, he found out that no, it wasn't done just because it was pretty, but that's the answer that he was given because he didn't have the proper credentials to possess or to have certain information. And this goes back to the whole self-entitlement issue we have. We don't think that there's any information that should be off limits to us. We feel like we're supposed to know everything and that we don't have to do anything to get it. But as usual, in typical, anthropologist fashion, he offered money to get the information. He's like, he don't care. He just wants the information. Well, I'll pay you for it. No problem. I'll pay you. And the chief told him, no, it wasn't about money. This is not an issue of just coming over here, grabbing my stuff for, and giving me some money. And, again, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? We have a lot of people that just go to the continent, pay for an initiation, they come back with the, title that they've given themselves, and they don't have any type of training whatsoever. And so this is the same thing this guy did. He just wanted to go over and steal or take the information and take it back to his own community to kind of prop himself up as this expert. Like, look what I got. So now we have this brand new invention. We have this new technology that I've brought back to you all. And that's the same thing we do with initiations. We go over there, get initiated. We don't know anything, but we get initiated. We get our elekes. We get, buy some African clothes, and then we come back and posture ourselves as a priest or a priestess. And so even in the clip, you can see, like, to get the information, the chief told him it's not an issue of money. He had to actually go through the initiation. And as you see, he really didn't even respect or understand what was going on. And he still really didn't get all of the information. But he saw that there were some things that he had to do in order to be entitled to some of the information. And again, like I said, this is the same thing we do. We, go and get initiations, and we buy the costumes of the culture, and we think we got it. And this is not African. This is not what we do. And, just as the book states, in Grasping the Root of Divine Power, Chief is trying to get you these courses, the books, the shows, all of these things are designed to help you get back to your African mind. And we're not talking about the physical location or the clothing or the costume, but it's just the way that you think and process information. You have to get out of this kind of Western mindset. And so finally, this man, he took the information that he was learning and pretty much just, now he's presenting it as almost his own, and he'll be listed in that long lineage of of scientists who so-called discovered things. But another thing I wanted to point out is that he also did something that a lot of us don't think about doing. And what that was is that he was able to take the information that he was learning and make it practical and make it work for him in his own reality, in his actual life. So he was able to fulfill his purpose and get paid doing it. He was able to travel, the whole continent for free. He got initiated for free. Of course he stole information and everything. But my point is that he didn't get initiated and lose sight of his original purpose. He didn't change his mind about being the type of scientist is what he was, or trying, he didn't get off the subject of studying fractals and binary code and things, and then just, after initiation decide, what, I'm gonna be a priest. But that's kind of what a lot of people do when they come into this tradition or into this knowledge. We completely forget about what it is, we have gifts or talents in, and then as soon as we, come in, it's like we want to get initiated, and boom, we want to be a priest. I want to be a priest, or I'm supposed to be a priestess or a healer. Those are the three things: priest, priestess, or a healer. We don't see how we can incorporate these lessons that we learn into practical things. Or we don't see how we can enhance or further our own skills and talents using this information. And why is that? Of course, it's because we never get past the mythology to be able to have a deeper understanding of what we're learning that would allow us to actually apply what we learn. So I keep saying, again, the reasons for these webinars is to give you a deeper understanding of what you're doing, and so that you can perform these rituals with power, and so that you can take these courses and incorporate them into your everyday life. And so I've said this before as well, I'll say it again. Luckily for those of you who are listening to the shows and who have been students of the training, you've come into contact with a teacher who is trying to empower you with that knowledge. He's not like keeping the secrets to himself so that you can keep coming back to him for rituals and so you can pump his ego up or so you can keep paying him to do things. He's actually trying to empower you if you have the proper position of a good student. You're not entitled to certain information. Certain things there are stages to this, and you have to show a level of humility and respect. So, to close and to wrap things up, I just want to remind you that the next webinar again is alchemy, and we are tying these concepts together that we learned in the first two. And so we're basically trying to learn how to manipulate and transform tools outside of ourselves so that we can change our actual reality, so we can help ourselves out. So again, you can go to saduluhouse.com/events to register for that. And the webinar is on the 11th, which is next Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you get signed up, and that's definitely going to be like a really good webinar. I'm super pumped about it because, of course, this is my area. So I'll definitely see you all there, hopefully. Again, go to Enlightenment and Transformation TV on YouTube to check out this broadcast again, and to go back and listen to the clip that I showed you and see if you can catch some of the things that I brought out. Okay, so until next time, I'm Kim, your host. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day. Peace. Sadulu House Spiritual Center would like to invite you to join our learning community by encouraging you to sign up for our monthly webinars. Our webinars offer live interactive instruction designed to help empower you in your spiritual evolution and ritual work. The webinars we provide are purposed to help you dive deeper into the concepts and calculations of the Chief Jegna of Anu Nation, Haru Yuya Asan Anu, through the decoding and exploration of sound, symbol, ancient and contemporary text, and various other tools used to invoke a state of highest awareness. We are able to abandon the constrictions of dead thought to travel to higher states of awareness, which is our rightful designation. To view our list of webinars, go to saduluhouse.com/events. Topics for 2016 include meditation, spiritual cleansing, astral projection, chakras, crystals, water magic, candle magic, the third eye, animal totems, dreams, and sex magic. Remember, go to saduluhouse.com/events to register.